The Ascended didn't have a word for arrogance. The whole concept just seemed illogical. Arrogance implied a belief in superiority that could be proven false. And to the Ascended, their superiority wasn't a belief. It was a demonstrable, quantifiable fact. They were beings of pure, coherent energy, their minds literally woven into the fabric of space-time. They saw the universe not as a place of wonder and mystery, but as a grand, intricate equation that they, and only they, had already solved. Their empire, spanning entire galaxies, was a monument to this solution. They didn't travel in ships. They just tweaked the constants of reality itself. They didn't communicate with sound or light, but by a direct transfer of pure, logical thought. They didn't conquer. They corrected. Worlds that followed the principles of logic and order were uplifted. Worlds that wallowed in chaos, in the messy, unpredictable mire of emotion and individuality. They were rectified. Their judgment was absolute, their methods infallible. They were the gardeners of existence, pruning the chaotic weeds so that their perfect, orderly garden could flourish. And now, they had turned their gaze to a minor star system in an unremarkable spiral arm of an uninteresting galaxy. They had turned their gaze to Earth. The primitives on Sol 3, these humans. We've analyzed their biology, their crude technology, their fleeting empires. They're fragile, driven by chaotic emotions they call imagination. It's a flaw in their evolution, a mental frivolity. They're fit for servitude, nothing more. Let the subjugation commence. For 1,000 millennia, the Ascended Empire had judged countless species, and their judgment was always final. They were masters of physics. Reality was their plaything. But they were about to learn that the flaw in human psychology wasn't some quirky bug. It was a weapon. And they had just aimed it at the very laws of their own existence. Prelate Kalis floated in the observation nexum, a non-space of pure white light where thought became reality. Before him, data streams flowed like ghostly rivers, painting a complete picture of the species known as Homo sapiens. Kalis was ancient, even for an Ascended. As a xenotheorist, his job was to analyze new species, to figure out their potential for logical purity and where they fit in the Ascended's great framework. He'd done this countless times. He'd seen silicon life forms that built crystal cities inside stars. He'd communed with psychic gas giants that dreamed up entire philosophies over eons. He had cataloged them all, judged their adherence to the unbreakable laws of physics and logic, and passed sentence. It was always a clean, dispassionate process. But the humans were just annoying. Their biology is a mess of chemical inefficiencies, Kalis projected to his acolyte, a younger mind named Lyra. They are born, they decay, they die. Their whole cellular structure is a monument to flawed random evolution. They're walking contradictions, creatures of logic-defying chaos. Lyra's thought presence shimmered in agreement. Their technology is just as primitive, prelate. They burn fossilized plants for energy. They launch metal cans through their sky with controlled explosions. Some of their main weapons still use kinetics. Just simple bullets that are too basic for most advanced defenses to even bother countering. It's almost cute. Cuteness is a symptom of illogicality, Kalis corrected, though he secretly agreed. He focused on a data stream of human history. It was a bloody, nonsensical mess of war, art, love, and contradiction. They built incredible things only to let them crumble. They wrote complex music that served no logical purpose. They fought wars over ideas they couldn't even touch, like faith and freedom. Their history was horrifying to anyone else who saw it. They were a species constantly at war with itself, driven by whims and passions that flared up and died out like sparks. And then there was the most baffling flaw of all: imagination. Kalis isolated the neural patterns of this phenomenon. On his displays, it was a storm, a chaotic surge of non-linear, paradoxical, and utterly useless data. Unlike the neat and tidy thoughts of a logical species, which moved from premise to conclusion, the human mind was a whirlwind of what if. What if pigs could fly? What if time ran backward? What if there were colors no one had ever seen? To the ascended, these weren't creative questions. They were calculation errors, the mental equivalent of dividing by zero. Any species that wasted so much brain power on impossibilities was fundamentally broken. Their minds, they can apparently bend reality and physics to their will, but only inside their own heads, Lyra projected, a hint of disgust in her thought pattern. They invent fictional beings, fictional worlds, fictional laws of physics. They call it storytelling, art, daydreaming. It's a kind of self-induced psychosis. It serves no purpose. It is a cancer of the intellect, Kalis declared with finality. A flaw that keeps them from seeing the perfect singular reality of the great framework. They live in a fantasy of their own making. Therefore, they are unfit for uplift. They're a chaotic variable that has to be controlled. He gestured, and the data streams collapsed into a single command. Assessment complete. Species Homo sapiens. Categorized as illogical, chaotic, and inefficient. Recommendation: subjugation. They can provide manual labor for more logical species. Their imagination will be suppressed for their own good. Prepare the reality filter for deployment over their colony on Mars. The order was sent. Kalis felt that familiar sense of dispassionate closure. Another messy corner of the universe was about to be tidied up. The process was always the same. The reality filter would lay the Ascended's perfect, unbreakable laws of physics over the target area. All illogical tech would stop working. All chaotic biology would be pacified. The humans would be made docile and obedient within a single cycle. It was, after all, the only logical outcome. The Ascended didn't do surprises. Surprises were the result of bad data or flawed logic, and their logic was flawless. So when the reports started trickling back from the fleet above Mars, they weren't met with alarm, but with a deep system-wide confusion. The reality filter, a device that had peacefully conquered 1,000 worlds, was on the fritz. On the main observation nexum, the data was stark and completely impossible. The filter had been deployed, dropping a shimmering, invisible field of pure logic over the new human city of Ares Prime. Just as planned, human tech started to fail. Their rovers sputtered out. Their comms went dead. Their life support systems, relying on a messy soup of chemical reactions, began to flicker. But then something else happened. The filter itself started to break down. Its energy readings, normally as flat and calm as a glass lake, began to spike. Impossible energy readings started popping up. Readings that violated the conservation of momentum, time fluctuations that defied cause and effect. It was as if the filter, an instrument of pure logic, was being poisoned by the very chaos it was built to destroy. Report! The Grand Prelate's thought command echoed through the nexum, sharp and cold. Kalis came forward, the data from Mars swirling around him like angry ghosts. The filter is meeting resistance, Grand Prelate, but not physical resistance. It's logical resistance. The human presence is feeding paradoxical data into the framework itself. Explain, the Grand Prelate commanded. The word was a razor. We don't have enough data, Kalis admitted, which was basically an admission of failure for the Ascended. The chaotic neural emissions from the humans, their imagination, seemed to be interacting with the filter on a quantum level. It's not just a state of mind, it's an active force. Their minds are unconsciously projecting illogical possibilities into the field, and the filter is trying to calculate them. It's failing. The Grand Prelate was silent for a long moment, a silence that felt as heavy as a dying star. Never in the history of their empire had a primitive species defied the framework. They hadn't fought back with weapons. They fought back by just being human. Their very nature was poison to the Ascended's reality. This is unacceptable, the Grand Prelate finally projected. This anomaly must be understood. If there's a flaw in the framework, it must be found and fixed. You, Prelate Kalis, you assess this species. You will solve this. My recommendation? Kalis asked. Isolate the source. Grab a single human, one with the highest concentration of this imagination flaw. Bring it here. Dissect its mind. Find the root of this logic plague. Understand it, so we can engineer a cure. The order was given. The subjugation of Mars was paused. A single silent ship detached from the fleet and dropped through the thin Martian air, its sensors scanning the panicked city below for the loudest source of mental chaos. It found him in a small biodome, staring not at the failing systems or the dying lights, but at a canvas. His name was Elias Vance. He was an artist. While everyone else was scrambling in terror, he was furiously sketching the impossible sky, trying to capture the shimmering paradoxical light of the failing reality filter. His mind wasn't on survival. It was on the terrifying, beautiful impossibility of what he was seeing. His neural scans were, to the Ascended, a siren's call of pure, beautiful madness. He was the perfect specimen. A beam of colorless light swallowed him. The charcoal pencil fell from his hand. Elias Vance, artist and dreamer, vanished from Mars, leaving behind an unfinished sketch of a sky that shouldn't exist. Elias woke up in white, an absolute uniform white. There were no corners, no ceiling, no floor, just a boundless, sterile light that seemed to press in on him. He wasn't tied down, but he felt trapped, the way a single thought is trapped inside a mind. "You are awake," a voice echoed, not in his ears, but right inside his skull. It was calm, dispassionate, and carried the ancient, chilling weight of absolute certainty. "Do not be alarmed. Alarm is an illogical emotional response." Elias turned, trying to find the voice, but there was nothing. "Who are you?" he asked, his own voice sounding small and fragile. "Where am I?" A flicker in the white void, a being formed out of shimmering, structured light. It was vaguely human-shaped, but had no features, a living silhouette cut from space-time itself. This was Prelate Kalis. "I am Prelate Kalis. You are in an Ascended observation chamber. We brought you here to study a fundamental flaw in your species." "A flaw?" Elias shot back, a spark of defiance cutting through his fear. "What flaw?" "The one you call imagination," Kalis projected. It is a form of computational chaos, a deviation from logical reality. It is the source of the anomaly that disrupted our procedures. We need to understand it. Kalis started the first test, activating a scanner designed to map a mind's neural pathways. They'd used it on 1 billion species to read linear thoughts and memories. When it touched Elias's mind, it found something else. It found the memory of a childhood fantasy about a dragon made of smoke and starlight. It found the half-baked plot of a novel about a city that could walk. It found the impossible geometry of a sculpture he'd only dreamed of. It found paradoxes, metaphors, and feelings given form. It found a universe of things that were not, but could be. For the scanner, this was like feeding sand to a perfect machine. It tried to quantify hope. It tried to assign a mathematical vector to the memory of love. It tried to process the logical contradiction of a sad smile. On the observation nexum, alarms blared for the first time in millennia. The scanner shorted out in a shower of error reports, its delicate crystal processors fractured by the sheer, illogical volume of a human imagination. Kalis stared at the blinking red symbols, his perfect composure showing its first tiny crack. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Your mind is unstructured, Kalis projected, his thought laced with a new alien feeling. Bafflement. Welcome to the club, Elias muttered. The next test was physical. Kalis cranked up the local gravity, expecting the frail human body to collapse. Elias stumbled, his knees buckling. He felt the crushing force, the strain on his bones. But as he struggled, his mind did what it always did when faced with a grim reality. He imagined it differently. He pictured the floor not as hard and unyielding, but as soft and bouncy, like a giant trampoline. It was a stupid, childish thought. He didn't expect anything to happen. But Kalis saw it. For a single, infinitesimal moment, the law of conservation of energy registered a violation, a blip, a meaningless ripple in the fabric of reality, coming from the human. It was impossible, a rounding error in the math of God. Kalis dismissed it as a sensor ghost. You see the perfection of the framework, Kalis projected, returning the gravity to normal. The laws are absolute. Logic is the foundation of everything. Why do you cling to your chaotic thoughts? Why process pointless fantasies? Elias looked at the shimmering, faceless being. For the first time, he didn't see a captor. He saw something profoundly, tragically empty. Have you ever heard a story? Elias asked. A real one? The kind that makes you forget you're even listening? Have you ever imagined a color that doesn't exist? Or a feeling you've never felt? Those are non-concepts, worthless data. No, Elias said, shaking his head. That's not what they are. They're the whole point. He looked around the featureless white room. You live in a universe with only one answer. We live in a universe of infinite questions. That's not a flaw. It's the difference between a cage and a frontier. The ripples from Mars were turning into waves. The instability in the reality filter was spreading through the Ascended's network like a virus of illogic. The quantum ghosts and causal paradoxes flickering around the human colony were a perfect match for the tiny blips Kalis had seen in the observation chamber. The source was confirmed. Human imagination wasn't a passive flaw. It was an active plague. Panic was an illogical state, but the Ascended leadership was now in a state of extreme, orderly crisis. Kalis got a new directive. its imperatives sharp and severe. The subject must be pushed. Understand the nature of this contamination. Find a way to create a logical patch. The integrity of the great framework is paramount. Kahless returned to the White Chamber. This time, no brute force. He would use a test of pure logic. He made a solid energy door appear at one end of the room. At the other, 20 meters away, an energy key shimmered on a pedestal. The puzzle was simple. Walk to the key, use it to open the door. A basic test of cause and effect. Elias watched with a weary sigh. Another test. Another box designed by a creature that couldn't imagine anything outside of it. He was a rat in a maze, and he was tired of playing. He'd been subjected to endless puzzles and probed until his thoughts felt raw. He was done. He refused to play their game. He just sat down in the middle of the floor, crossed his legs, and closed his eyes. Instead of walking, he began to imagine. He didn't imagine the key flying to him. He knew that wasn't how it worked. It wasn't magic. He imagined the story of the key. He imagined the key wasn't 20 meters away. He imagined it was already in his hand. He pictured it with an artist's focus, the cool, weightless feel, the way the light would refract through it, the faint hum it would emit. He built the what if, not as a wish, but as a fully realized alternative fact inside his own mind. On the observation nexum, the chamber's diagnostic monitors began to scream. The key didn't teleport. Elias didn't move, but the space between them began to unravel. The fundamental constant of distance started to fluctuate. To the Ascended's sensors, the 20 meters separating Elias and the key was no longer a fixed value. It became a probability wave. For a moment, the distance was 20 meters, then 10, then 100, then all three at once. The key's position in space-time became uncertain, smeared across a spectrum of possibilities because a human had decided to imagine it somewhere else. It was quantum uncertainty on a macro scale, triggered by a thought. "Cease!" Kahless commanded, his projection flickering. "What are you doing to the framework?" Elias opened his eyes, feeling drained but strangely vindicated. "I'm not doing anything to your framework," he said. "I'm just imagining. It's what we do. We tell ourselves stories. We wonder what if. And sometimes, if we wonder hard enough, the universe gets curious and wonders with us. We call it inspiration, or discovery, or art." The implications finally crashed through Kahless's millennia of conditioning. The human mind wasn't a flawed computer. It was a rogue reality engine. Imagination wasn't a bug. It was the ability to inject a new, non-logical rule into a closed system. These frail emotional apes didn't just live in reality. They were co-authors, constantly scribbling notes in the margins of physics. And, for the first time in his eternal existence, Prelate Kahless experienced an illogical, chaotic, and profoundly human emotion. He felt fear. He now saw humanity not as a flaw to be corrected, but as a threat that couldn't be measured. The Grand Prelate and the Ascended leadership felt Kahless's fear. It was a wrong note in their perfect symphony of logic, a single corrupted file threatening the entire network. Their best xenotheorist had been contaminated. The experiment was a catastrophic failure. The human species was a logic plague, a walking paradox that could unravel their reality just by existing. The final directive was issued, cold and hard. The anomaly is untenable. The subject is the epicenter. Erase it. Cleanse the framework. Terminate the human. Inside the chamber, Kalis received the order. A section of the wall dissolved, revealing an energy emitter. It began to glow with the light of pure negation, a beam that didn't burn or vaporize, but simply erased things from existence. In a moment of rebellion that defied his entire being, Kalis hesitated. He had seen the terror in the human's mind, but he had also seen its boundless, terrifying beauty. He had seen dragons made of smoke and cities that walked. To erase this was illogical. It was the destruction of data. He broke protocol. He relayed the order to the primitive. "They are going to erase you," Kalis projected, the thought tinged with a own newfound fear. "They believe your existence is a threat to the framework itself." Elias looked at the glowing emitter, the embodiment of absolute logic coming to correct him. Fear coiled in his stomach. He could try to imagine a shield, a weapon, an escape. He could imagine himself a superhero, but he wasn't a warrior. He was an artist. And in his final moments, he wouldn't create a weapon. He would create a masterpiece. He looked at the sterile white walls, the faceless void, and the growing silent scream of the negation beam, and he didn't fight what he saw. He reframed it. He unleashed his entire being, every story he'd ever read, every song that had moved him, every dream, every hope, every fear, into one final defiant act of creation. He imagined the chamber wasn't a prison, but a grand concert hall. He imagined the lethal hum of the emitter was the opening note of a symphony. He imagined the cold, white void was a canvas, waiting for color. He imagined the ascended, his captors, were not executioners, but an audience waiting for the show to begin. He didn't just imagine it. He built it into a narrative so complete, so dense with illogical emotional truth, that it became a reality. He imagined a universe governed not by math, but by beauty, where the flow of time was dictated by rhythm and tempo, and the fabric of space was woven from harmony and dissonance. The Ascended's reality engine, the machine that powered their existence, tried to process this. It was a request to render a symphony with no sound, in a hall with no dimensions, for an audience outside of time. It was a paradox on an existential scale. It was like asking a calculator to compute the color of love. The system was given rules for a universe that could not and must not exist within its own. And so the engine did the only logical thing it could. It tried to execute the command. It tried to create Elias's story. The negation beam fired. But instead of erasing Elias, it shattered into a million impossible colors the Ascended had no names for. The chamber didn't explode. It blossomed. The perfect white bled into vibrant, shifting hues. The straight lines of Ascended architecture curved into elegant, flowing forms. The laws of thermodynamics, of gravity, of causality became mere suggestions, replaced by the principles of narrative tension and poetic justice. The Ascended vessel, once a monument to logic, became a living work of art. The Ascended themselves were caught in the symphony. Their minds, built for a universe of absolute certainty, were suddenly adrift in a sea of metaphor. They couldn't process it. Their consciousness, woven from logic, began to unravel in the beautiful, terrible chaos. They weren't dying. They were being overwritten by a better story. In the heart of the beautiful chaos, Prelate Kalis remained. His brief exposure to fear and curiosity had inoculated him just enough to stay coherent. The Nexum was gone, replaced by a swirling nebula of thought and color. He saw his fellow Ascended, not erased, but transformed, into silent, shimmering motes of light, no longer masters of reality, but passive elements in a grand, incomprehensible painting. He looked for the human. Elias Vance stood where the chamber had been. He was the calm center of the storm, the conductor of the impossible symphony. The energy of the failed reality engine swirled around him, not as a weapon, but as a palette of raw creation, bending to his will. Outside, the reality filter over Mars shattered. It didn't just vanish. It exploded into a silent, blossoming nebula of pure potential, a permanent scar on the Martian sky that showed what happened the day a human dreamed too hard. Elias turned his attention to Kalis. There was no malice in his gaze, no triumph, only a profound, gentle pity. "You see?" he communicated, not with words, but with a shared feeling Kalis could now finally understand. The universe isn't a textbook waiting to be solved. It's a story waiting to be written, and everyone gets a pen. The Ascended Empire didn't fall. It just became irrelevant. Their mastery over the known laws of physics was absolute, but they had met a species that treated those laws as a first draft. Their perfect logic was no defense against a good story. How can you conquer a people who can imagine a reality where you've already lost? Humanity didn't become the galaxy's new ruler. They became its new, unpredictable, and frankly terrifying artists. The galaxy had discovered what humans were truly capable of. Their flaw was now the most potent force in the universe, a power that couldn't be measured or fought with logic. It could only be experienced, like a song. And so, the Ascended learned that the greatest power in the universe wasn't the mastery of what is, but the boundless ability to dream of what could be. They learned that reality isn't a static equation, but an endless collaborative story. And the most dangerous and beautiful sound in the cosmos is a single human voice, whispering the two most powerful words in any language. What if? Subscribe for more. HFY Stories.